Welcome back to Next Stop Apex. In this episode, we continue our journey by focusing on student experiences with transportation and what getting around in Apex really feels like day to day. In our first episode, we talked about public transit in Apex from a planning and policy perspective. We learned about studies, timelines, and long term goals. But transportation isn't just something that exists on paper.
It's something people experience every single day, especially students.
For many students, the school bus is their first and sometimes only experience with public transportation. It shapes how they get to school, how long their day is, and how much independence they feel.
And while school buses serve an important role, they don't solve everything. They don't help students get to after-school activities, jobs, wake tech classes, or places they need to be outside of school hours.
And that's why in this episode, we want to hear directly from a student, not statistics or reports, but real experiences.
We're talking with a student who relies on school bus transportation and is willing to share how it affects her daily life, her schedule, and her sense of independence.
She also shares her thoughts on transportation in Apex more broadly, including what works, what doesn't, and what she hopes could change in the future.
This conversation reminds us that transportation decisions don't just affect traffic patterns, they affect real people, real routines, and real opportunities.
So let's hear her story.
Since students rely on buses every day, their voices are really important in this conversation. We're joined by Akshara, who rides the bus regularly here in Apex.
Thanks for being here, Akshara. Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell us what your daily bus ride is like? And what would you say the best part is, and what would you say the hardest part is?
Um, I think my daily bus ride is just after the bell rings, I go straight to the bus. Um, and the hardest part is getting the bus on time, I guess, because I'm first route, so sometimes they might leave like before I get there, especially if I have a test fourth period and I need extra time. There's not much time for me to like be there and finish the test. So I guess that's the best or the hardest part. And the best part is that I don't know, since I'm like first round, I gotta go home early.
So, have you ever had to adjust your timing because of the bus schedule that was made, or having to come early to your bus stop or to the bus loop?
Well, yeah, cause like my bus used to be like second round, so I would have to wait like 20-ish minutes. But now that it's earlier, I don't have time to like stay after for a test, so I have to like finish quickly and come.
Mhm.
Okay, so how would you say that relying on the bus affects these things in general? Like, do you think that maybe if you didn't have to rely on the bus and you got that extra time on your test, like you'd be doing a little better? I don't know.
Um, I mean, I guess like I'd be doing like a little better on the test, but also I guess that doesn't really have much to do with it. But I do have to like rely heavy on the bus to get home. So yeah.
Do you feel like the bus routes and stops really meet the students' needs, or do you think there are gaps? Like, do you think there's any flaws with your bus schedule that you have right now?
No, I think it's fine. Like, cause my morning bus, although I don't really take it that often, it comes pretty late, which is um good for the students. So I think there's not many gaps or anything.
And knowing that you're now go through the first route, and before you had route two, what are some changes that you noticed?
Some changes that I have to like run to the bus every day right after school. Like, there's no time to wait and talk to people.
And then, like a kind of an add-on question to that, when you had when you were second route, um, was waiting? Did it feel like a time waste to you?
I mean, yeah, kind of, but also at the same time, like, not really, cause it gave me more time to talk to my friends.
Mhm.
what do you think about the idea of having more bus routes or like in addition to the public transit? I think that's a good thing because of like just the idea of public transportation is a good idea. And for others that like not just our school, but why do you think like there needs to be an expansion on public transit for others in Apex?
I think it's like better accessibility because not everyone can afford a car, and also it's like reduced in carbon emissions, so it's like better overall.
Yeah, no, I like what you're saying. Um, a lot of people are discouraged from using public transit because like of how limited it is. Like, it's not as accessible as it should be. So yeah. So like on that note, if you could change anything about the student transportation or just transportation system in general, in Apex right now, what would you change?
Um, for like the school or like general for the public to use? You could give both if you'd like. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't really have any for the school. Um, I just say like for the school, maybe like post the times where the buses are coming and leaving like more frequently and it's so that's more known. And for the public, I think well, one, they should like add more like buses so that people could use them and they should like advertise them a lot because I don't think many people know the option that there is an option of using buses and stuff. So yeah, they should definitely like talk about it more often.
Okay.
Thank you, Akshara, for sharing your experience. It really shows how transit decisions affect everyday student life.
Yeah, and it reminds us that improving buses isn't just about policy, and it's about making sure students can get to school, activities, and jobs reliably. So, thank you. Hearing these student experiences makes it clear that transportation in Apex isn't just about routes and schedules. It's about independence, access, and how students can actually move throughout their day. But these experiences don't exist in isolation. They're shaped by planning decisions, assumptions about walking distance, cost, and what transportation is expected to look like in a town like Apex. To understand how these students' realities connect to a bigger picture, we're going to return to our conversation with Mr. Gant, who explains how student needs are being considered in long term transit planning. Here's what he had to say. So as students, we also feel the gaps in bus service directly. So how do you see youth voices being included in like long-term transit decision?
Yeah. Um, yeah, one of the challenges we have in local government is that we hear a lot from the same demographic, and that's typically people between 50 and 70 years old, let's say. Um, and the youth are not well represented a lot of times in some of these discussions. Um, so I guess a couple of reactions I have. One is that on there's a Apex has it used to be called the Transit Committee. Now it's a multimodal committee made up of residents that advises the council on transit and other like sidewalks and that kind of thing. Um, for that committee and every other one that Apex has now, there is a youth member on that committee. So it's an acknowledgement that we need to hear from you guys, your age group. Um, also, when we've done surveys about the prioritization study that I sent you guys and you guys read that Apex did. There was um, outreach to the high schools, and we tried to get in touch with some of the people we thought would be future riders of that bus or the other buses in Apex to make sure they were heard. So I think the way it, I think we tried it by um, when there were when we did some on bus surveys and we made sure that if there was a youth person on the bus, we tried to get them to take a survey. Yeah, part of it, we can't like reveal their information as much because there's privacy concerns with the youth. But we made sure and we noted when a youth person took that survey, and then the high schools were there was some contacts we made with the administration to say, and maybe I'm not sure it got to you guys or not if you saw that, but we tried to see if they would help us gather input from the students on that. So I think those two things are helpful, but admittedly, it probably was mostly people in their, you know, 50s to 70s who took the survey, and they are bus riders too because a lot of times they can't drive or they either they don't want to drive anymore because of safety issues or whatever. But we definitely need to hear from you guys the most. And I'm so glad that's why you guys are doing this project to raise awareness. I love it.
I mean, I would love to focus on this topic because I do see issues with a lot of other students at our school. When it comes to going from one place to another, especially now, since we've all come to the age where we're all wanting to be able to drive, and then even then, all of the seniors and juniors that do come to school every day with their cars have to wait themselves in their own car so everyone can like leave safely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot, when sporting events, schools, everybody's leaving at the same time. It's hard. I get it. We I'm not sure how it is at your school. We've heard that people are not getting their license as early as they used to, and they're not going when they're, you know, 15 and a half to get the driver's permit or the learner's permit. And we've heard, yeah, at least the story is that there may be more demand for transit because of the more delayed um, need or the desire to drive. Um, Also, for what it's worth, when I turned 16, I bought, it was about a 10-year-old Nissan Altima, that brand. The car was $4,000. And my understanding, I haven't bought a used car in a bit. Um, but my understanding is you can't get a used car for less than like $10,000 now. So like who can afford that when you're 16? I mean, you can't work at a restaurant or whatever the jobs are and pay a for $10,000 worth of a car. I mean, it has to be the parents probably giving car most often. But yeah, I think the way you guys are, your generation has your preferences and desires. I think transit is very well aligned with that. So, I hope so at least because that would be great to have a bigger population that need the service.
And I also wanted to add that perspective you were talking about like inflation and everything, of how despite wanting to be able to travel with like your own vehicle, indefinitely more like, I guess there's more like pressures compared to taking public transit, which would definitely benefit that use.
For what's worth, also when I turned 16, gas was $1 a gallon. Kinda saying this, but yeah, it was really cheap. The cars were cheap, and it's much more expensive now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think like the financial instability with a lot of people, public transit, it could be really helpful for them. And like, obviously, there's school buses to get to and from school, but like, if they want to go anywhere else, they don't have to like rely on their parents or like other people to take them, and they'll have an accessible option. So I think
Yeah. Oh, I think people undervalue the money too. Like, it's not just the how much the car cost and the gas, but it's insurance too, and if you need new tires, it's like, I'm not sure the current price, maybe $700 for new tires. I mean, everything is just so expensive when it comes to car ownership. And people just they I don't think they I think they in their head they think of it as like you have to spend that money if you want to get to your job or school pool, you have to do it. There's no other option. And that is the case for the most part, but we're trying to change that so that uh it's not the only option to drive everywhere. And so
they can
but
put public transit as a consideration.
yeah, yeah. And at the very least, I would love for there to be way more like one car households. Right now, I'm pretty sure the average car for a person in our area is at almost one of the driving age. And the better we do with transit, the more and more it could be like a car that, that the husband and wife and the partners share, and they drive the kids around, and it'd be great to change that ratio a little bit.
Mm. And I would also like to add, I feel like one of the biggest things, like I guess when it just comes to like general like characteristics of people, especially now, is like not being necessarily introverted, but like isolated because they like take their own paths, especially like vehicles, I guess you could say, because it's either like friend groups taking one car, then again for budget, I guess you could say. But another factor is it's like even taking public transit or like riding the bus, I feel like that just builds more communication in general, which I think is necessary.
So in this country, there's been a lot of stuff written about how lonely people are, and I don't know if transit can really change that, but there is something to be said for being in a shared space like a bus or a train that, you hear a lot about people like, especially like in movies, it's like, oh, the person looked across the train and there was this beautiful girl or handsome guy, and that they went and talked to him, and they lived happily after. I'm not sure that happens too often, but it is something. Shared spaces like that, and not just in transit, but a lot of places, are really important in this country because people, they just go to work or school and home, and they have friends, but a lot of time is spent kind of in their spaces that are not shared.
Hearing Akshara's experience really shows how transportation affects students in ways that we don't always think about. It's not just about getting from point A to B. It's about time, about stress, about independence, and about the choices that students are able to make, or sometimes aren't able to make. When a bus runs early, late, or on a rigid schedule, students have to build their entire day around it. That can mean rushing through a test instead of finishing it confidently, skipping time with friends after school, or giving up opportunities like clubs, sports, jobs, or tutoring. Over time, those trade-offs add up. They shape how students experience school, how independent they feel, and how much control they have over their own schedules. Akshara's story makes it clear that transportation isn't just a background issue. It actively shapes student life. And when systems don't fully support students, they're often the first to feel those gaps.
When buses run early, late, or on rigid schedules, students have to adjust their entire day around them. That can mean rushing through tests, missing time with friends, or giving up opportunities after school.
And when we connect those experiences to what Mr. Gant shared, it becomes clear that these aren't isolated problems. They're shaped by long-term planning decisions, funding priorities, and assumptions about how people move through a town like Apex.
What stood out the most is that students are often the first to feel the gaps in transportation, but their voices aren't always the loudest in those conversations. Even though progress is being made, there's still a disconnect between planning and lived experience.
This episode reminds us that transportation isn't just an infrastructure issue, it's a quality of life issue. It affects how connected people feel, how independent they can be, and how accessible these opportunities really are.
As Apex continues to grow, listening to student experiences like Akshara's will be essential because a system that works for students is usually a system that works better for everyone.
Thanks for listening to Next Stop Apex. In our next episode, we'll bring together everything we've learned so far and look ahead at what a meaningful change could actually look like.
We'll see you at the next stop.